He slept in the room next door, but no one else could see him. I moved into that house on a day when the sky was white with snow. Vermont in the winter doesn't forgive anyone, and no one had forgiven me either. After a year-long divorce, all I had left was a small amount of money, a suitcase of clothes, and a pile of unsigned paperwork. There was no place that made me feel like I belonged, except for that old house my aunt had left behind, tucked deep in the woods, a place no one came to unless they were lost. The 2-story cabin was built from pine. The floors creaked every time I stepped on them, but it was quiet, too quiet. I chose to sleep in the room at the top of the stairs on the right. The room to the left, I kept it locked for no particular reason. I just had a feeling that I shouldn't open that door. The first 3 days passed in silence. I cleaned, unpacked, cooked simple meals, tried to adjust to the new life. But on the 4th night, I heard knocking. Knock, knock, knock. It was unmistakably the sound of knocking on the wall from the room next door. I turned off the lights and sat still. 3 knocks came again, steady, not hurried, not loud, as if someone just wanted me to know they were there, but meant no harm. I didn't dare open my door. I didn't dare open the room next door either. I slept with the blanket pulled up to my chin, trying to convince myself it was mice, or maybe the wind hitting the old wooden siding. Anything but a person. The next morning, I walked over to the neighbor's house, about 300 meters away. Mr. Sam, a man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and a slightly wary gaze. "I think maybe someone got into the house," I said, trying not to let my voice shake. Sam just smiled. "That house has been empty for years. No one lives within a mile of here except you and me. There's no theft around here. It's safe." "What if I told you I've been hearing footsteps every night and someone knocking on the wall?" He looked at me for a moment, then gently patted my shoulder. "You've been through a lot. Maybe you're just tired." I didn't say anything else, because if I told him the truth, that I had seen a man walk out of that room this morning, he'd definitely think I was losing my mind. This morning, I woke up early and went down to the kitchen like usual, but as I climbed the stairs, I saw a shadow, a man, standing with his back to me, right in front of the locked door. Dark hair, light gray sweater, mud-stained shoes, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. I froze. My heart stopped. I stepped back, ready to scream, but he turned around. "Good morning," he said, voice calm and low. "I didn't mean to scare you." I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at him. "You just moved in, right?" he asked. I nodded. "Who are you?" "I'm Nate. I live here." "In the room next door?" He gave a slight smile. "Yeah, I guess the walls are thin." I didn't know if I should believe what was happening or not. Nate looked completely real, from the mist of his breath in the cold air to the sound of his footsteps on the wooden floor. But when I asked Sam, he insisted, "There's no one named Nate there. No one's ever rented that room. You're living alone." That night, I heard the knocking again. 3 knocks, gentle, very gentle. Then his voice through the wooden wall. "Are you still awake?" I answered slowly, like I was whispering to something I couldn't quite explain. "Yes." His voice softened, warm, comforting. Then, "Sleep well, Elena?" I had never told him my name. I woke up near noon, but the house was still as cold as midnight. White frost clung to the windows. Everything in this house seemed to ignore the passing of time. I walked to the door of the room next door. Still locked. The doorknob was rusty. There was no way anyone could have gotten in or out without a key. So, who did I see yesterday? I remembered that voice clearly. Software masculine, but not loud. And his eyes, when he turned to look at me, there was something real in them, not a hallucination. I didn't open the door. I just stood there for a long while, staring at the scratched old wood, not sure whether I was hoping to hear the knocking again or for the silence to remain forever. I tried to live as if nothing had happened, but the feeling of being watched, the sense that someone was standing somewhere in the dark, it followed me every minute. By the afternoon, I started keeping a journal. Day 6, I've heard the knocking for the 3rd time. I saw a person, or I believe I did, named Nate. I'm starting to doubt my own memory, but if I made him up, why do I remember the smell of coffee on his shirt? And why do I feel at peace when I hear his voice? I closed the journal, turned off the lights, and waited, as if my body had already adapted to a strange rhythm. Denial by day, confrontation by night. Around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway, not loud, light, steady. I didn't open the door, but I sat up straight. Then came the sound of a door opening, the room next door. A minute later, I heard running water, the kitchen faucet. I crept down the stairs, didn't turn on the lights, just stood behind the kitchen door, peeking through the crack. He was there, Nate, washing a mug under the faucet. He wore a dark t-shirt, his hair slightly wet as if he had just showered. But what I couldn't take my eyes off was his expression, calm, unworried, as if this was his house, as if I was the intruder. I gathered my courage and pushed the door open. "What are you doing here?" He turned, gave a slight smile. "Your mug's been in the sink since morning." I looked at the mug. It was indeed the one I had used that morning, but I clearly remembered washing it. "I thought that room was locked." "It is, but I never left." His answer sent a chill down my spine. "No one sees you but me. You know that, right?" He nodded. "Why?" Nate didn't answer. He just placed the now clean mug on the rack and stepped closer. The moonlight through the window lit up his eyes. They gleamed like glass, clear but sorrowful. "I'm not asking you to believe. It's just that if you still hear the knocking, still see me standing in the kitchen like this, maybe some part of you still wants me to exist." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my room, continuing my journal. Day 7. If I'm going crazy, then this is the gentlest madness. If I'm dreaming, then I never want this dream to end. I closed the notebook and looked toward the wall separating the 2 rooms, and for the first time in many years, I smiled, even though I wasn't sure whether I was living in reality or memory. The next morning, I decided to see a therapist, because if I didn't, I feared I would fall even deeper into this feeling I still couldn't name. Dr. Miriam's clinic was in a small town south of here, about a 40-minute drive from my house. Outside, the snow piled high. Inside, the soft scent of lavender and the ticking of a wall clock filled the space. I told her everything, no holding back. I hear knocking on the wall at night, and I see a man living in the room next door. I talk to him. He knows my name, even though I never told him. But only I can see him. My neighbor says, "No one's there." Dr. Miriam didn't interrupt. She simply took notes and nodded slowly. "Have you experienced insomnia before?" she asked. "I don't sleep deeply, but not to the point of hallucinations." "Have you ever had significant trauma as a child?" I went silent. I couldn't recall much of my childhood other than a large dark gap. The time I lived with my aunt after my mother passed. My father never spoke about it, and I had never asked. Dr. Miriam set down her pen and gently asked, "Elena, if there were a part of your memory that had been buried, would you want to uncover it, even if it might hurt?" I hesitated, then nodded. That afternoon, I drove home through the snow. Standing in front of the room next door, I made a decision. I had to face it. I searched for the old key in a wooden box tucked in the attic. It took nearly an hour to find. When I finally turned the lock, my hand trembled like I was breaking into my own house. The room was coated in dust, curtains drawn tight. No sign of anyone living here recently. No coffee mug, no clothes, no bed made, only a small chest in the corner. I opened it. Inside were a few old photographs, some documents, a thin notebook, and one black and white picture, its edges slightly torn. It was this very house, in the summer, many years ago. A man stood on the front porch, dark hair, white dress shirt, face turned to the side. He looked just like Nate, uncannily so. My heart stopped. I turned the photo over, written faintly in faded ink. Elena, summer 2009, taken before the trip. Elena? Me? Or someone with the same name? I collapsed to the floor, gripping my head. That night, Nate didn't appear. No knocking, no footsteps, no voice. I didn't know what I wished for more, the truth or the illusion. The next morning, I brought the photo to Sam. He stared at it for a long time, then exhaled quietly. "I never wanted to bring it up," he said, voice much lower than usual. "But if you found this photo, then maybe it's time." "I want to know who this is," I said. "Is this Nate?" Sam nodded. "That's him." I stood frozen. "But it's not that simple, Elena. He disappeared years ago. Police investigated. They never found a body, no conclusion, no arrests. Then why do I see him? Why do I have this photo?" Sam looked at me for a long moment, then said carefully, "Because maybe you knew him once." I came home utterly confused. If what Sam said was true, if I had once known Nate, once been close to him, then why couldn't I remember a single thing? I'm not someone who forgets easily. I can still recall the first shirt I wore to college. I remember the names of my third-grade classmates, but I can't remember the face of someone who once lived in the same house as me. I dug through everything I could find. Old photo albums, memory boxes, journals from my teenage years. And then I found it. A thin leather notebook buried deep in a storage bin, tied shut with a crumbling rubber band. On the cover, just one phrase, "Summer 2009. I opened the first page. June 8th, someone new just moved into the house next door. His name is Nate. My heart clenched. The next page read, "He's unlike anyone else in this town. Not loud, not overly cheerful, but his eyes make me feel calm." I know this sounds insane, but after just 2 weeks, I think I'm falling in love. I kept reading, all the way to the final pages. The tone had changed, fragmented, bitter, full of hurt. I saw him at the lake with that blonde girl. He said she was just an old friend, but I know a lie when I see one. I walked away, drove home without looking back. I don't even know if I cried or screamed the whole way. And then a page was torn out. The last page, I didn't remember writing any of it. Didn't remember meeting Nate. Didn't remember ever loving anyone so deeply it could break me. I sat in the dark. The journal slipped from my hand, and the fragments started to return, blurry, scattered, like a faded negative, the sound of wind at night, a name I used to whisper, the scent of wood smoke on a leather jacket, his voice written to me on a summer evening, and then brakes screeching, an impact, a scream. I jolted upright, clutching my head. I had driven away, driven in a storm of anger. Ahead of me, rain and blurry headlights, and a figure running across the road. I couldn't let myself remember more. The next morning, I went to see my father. He lived 3 hours away in a small house near a lake. "You have to tell me the truth," I said, my voice trembling. "About the summer of 2009, about Nate." He froze when he heard that name. After a long silence, he spoke. "You went through severe trauma that year. Your mother passed away. Then the accident. We didn't know how to handle it." I looked him in the eye. "I caused the accident, didn't I?" He didn't answer right away. He just nodded slightly. "The police didn't have enough evidence. No witnesses. Everything was unclear. And then he disappeared. They never found a body." Hearing it crushed something inside me. I don't remember anything. I don't know why I forgot. But now, he's coming back. In the room next door, in my head. My father held my hand, his eyes misting over. "Maybe that was your mind's way of protecting you all these years. But if he's returned, then maybe it's time you faced him." That night, I came home, and for the first time, I opened the door to the room next door, not out of curiosity, but because I knew I had once belonged there. The room was still empty, but I could feel his breath everywhere, and then a voice, not through the wall, not through illusion, but right behind me. "Elena." I turned around. Nate stood there, looking at me, not with the sorrow he always carried, but as if he was finally seeing the real me again. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just stood there, in front of Nate, a man who had died long ago, but was now sitting calmly in the wooden chair, tilting his head as he looked at me with a strangely gentle expression. There was no wind, no ticking clock, only me and him, in a moment that I knew, deep down, couldn't possibly be real. I spoke first, my voice barely a whisper. "I remember now." He didn't reply, but his eyes, they looked at me as if he'd been waiting for this moment for a very long time. I remember that night. I was screaming. I was crying. I drove like I had lost my mind. And I paused, choking. "I hit you." The room went still. I saw you lying there, blood on your forehead, eyes closed, and I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I just remember running away. Nate stayed silent. I sat down in front of him, buried my face in my hands. After that, I forgot everything. My mind just locked the memory away. I lived like it never happened, like you never existed. My voice cracked like a child's. "I'm sorry." I reached out, tried to touch his hand, but my fingers met air, cold, empty. I looked up. The chair was empty. The room, silent. Nate was gone. Only me, alone, facing a truth that was bitter, but no longer hidden. The next morning, I left the house. I didn't bring anything, just the old photo, and the journal labeled Summer 2009. I walked into the police station. My voice trembled, but stayed steady. "I have something to confess about an accident from many years ago." I told them everything, every detail, nothing left out. The officers took my statement. They reopened the missing person case from 2009, the one they had long closed. They made no promises, no guarantees, only that they would investigate. 3 days later, the story hit local news. Woman confesses to hit and run tied to 2009 missing person case. The article had a blurred photo of me, face obscured, but enough for people to talk. I prepared for court. I was ready to take whatever punishment came. But then, on the fourth morning, everything changed. A man walked into the police station. His name was Gregory S., 61 years old. He brought with him a handwritten confession letter, a hand-drawn map of a large tree in the woods behind town, and a copy of his medical records. Stage 4 cancer, not much time left. Gregory told them that same night he had been driving too fast after a fight with his wife. On a back road, he saw a man stumbling in the middle of the street, clearly injured, maybe from a previous accident. Gregory couldn't stop in time. He hit him. The man collapsed, bleeding, unconscious. Gregory panicked, and instead of calling for help, he dragged the body off the road and buried it beneath a large tree, in a place he once worked as a logger. No one saw. No one suspected. He had lived with the guilt for over a decade until he saw the news about my confession. He said, "I can't let an innocent person take the fall for me. I've lived wrong my whole life, and now I don't want to die a coward." Police followed the map. They found a buried arm bone with a titanium joint. It matched Nate's medical records. Nate had finally been found. No longer a ghost in memory, no longer a voice behind walls. He was real again, because the truth had been named. I was cleared of all charges, but I still carried the weight in my own way. I stood by Nate's grave that winter beneath a bare tree. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I simply whispered, "I lived like you were still here, and maybe that's why you finally came back." I no longer hear the knocking on the wall, no more glimpses of a figure in the room next door, no more scent of coffee drifting down the hallway at 3 a.m. And strangely, I'm not sad, because for the first time in so many years, I don't need to imagine Nate anymore. He's no longer a dream hiding in my mind, no longer a memory my brain constructed to fill a void. He was named, he was found, and he was laid to rest like a person who deserved to be remembered. I returned to the old room, the room next door, not to search for him, but to say goodbye. I repainted the walls, hung new curtains, placed the summer 2009 journal in a box, sealed it shut, and stored it in the attic, where memories are honored, but no longer rule the present. Then I opened the window. The snow had melted, and the early spring sunlight was pouring in. I didn't know what I would do next. Maybe go back to teaching, maybe move somewhere new, maybe write it all down, every part of it, so that someone somewhere might understand. The truth, no matter how painful, must be faced, not to punish ourselves, but to be free for the dead and for the living. That night, I sat alone in the living room. I played an old song, one I had listened to all that summer long ago. I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilt, just warmth, partly from the fireplace, partly because inside, nothing was locked away anymore. Someone once asked me, "What made you decide to confess?" I thought for a moment, then answered, "Because I'd rather be judged for the truth than live a whole life pretending I was innocent." They didn't ask anything else. Months later, I received a letter from Gregory's wife, the man who had confessed before he died. There was one line I'll never forget. My husband died in peace because at last he had the courage to live honestly. I believe it was because of you, a woman who chose to take responsibility even when not all the blame was hers. I folded the letter, placed it in the box with the journal and old photos. Then I stepped outside. The sun was shining, and the tree in the front yard was beginning to bloom. Nate was gone, and I, for the first time, was truly alive. Final message: we can't rewrite the past, but we can stop pretending it never happened. Because only when the truth is named can the dead finally rest and the living finally be forgiven.